Mike Hestrin, welcome to Advocates for Truth. And it's a blessing to have you on. Mike Hestrin is Riverside County District Attorney, and you are a godsend. I can say that knowing, having litigated some cases, and one case in particular where your predecessor was prosecuted a pastor for totally unnecessary and unreasonable means or an unreasonable basis for which he prosecuted. You've come in, and I just want to congratulate you. So maybe the first question is, when are you running for governor?
Well, you must really despise me if you wish that on me, but no, not anytime soon, Bob. I'm very happy in the job that I have, and I am running for district attorney again.
Yeah, running for district attorney again in 2022. Well, I can tell you, there's many of us who would support a future run of something along those lines, or maybe the state attorney general. We really need to turn California around. I think it's going to happen. I think people are getting real frustrated, and over this COVID season, we've been litigating so many cases in my law firm against the governor. And the attorney general is out vigorously defending these cases. We've been litigating cases on behalf of churches, helped businesses, and it has just been a nightmare. But I can tell you one thing that has been fantastic is that we have not had to worry about Riverside County. And in Riverside County, people would question, well, how come you guys aren't facing all these problems in Riverside County with churches being shut down and things like that? Although some churches voluntarily closed, the question is how come they've been able to open and certain churches have stayed open? It's because we have you as our district attorney, and we have Chad Bianco as our sheriff, two believers and people who value the Constitution. But today I want to talk about gun violence, because the purpose of what we do is to really look at things from a biblical perspective on this podcast and videocast. And a couple weekends ago, it hit me. There were so many shootings that happened in the United States over one weekend. According to CNN, they call them mass shootings, but it says a series of mass shootings over the weekend left at least 11 people dead and another 69 injured. Chicago, Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, Norfolk, Virginia, Patterson, New Jersey, across the country. And so I'm looking at this article, and it's there's this big cry for gun control. Some want to seize our guns. Some want to just increase background checks, different things like that. And I look at it and say, what do you think? I believe the Bible, it helps to influence and should influence our lives in every aspect, in all of our thinking. And I'd like to know from you, how does the Bible relate to your thoughts on gun control, and what are your thoughts on gun control?
So let me if I could answer it in a little bit broad perspective. I've been working in the criminal justice system as a prosecutor for almost 25 years. I've been the elected DA for about 6 years. So I've got my entire career has been dealing with crime, violence. And so, the perspective that I have and that our system has is one of based on individual liberties, individual rights, and it comes from the dignity of every single person born with a bundle of rights endowed by their creator. That's what our founding document says. And so I think that Judeo-Christian the Judeo-Christian values undergird our criminal justice system. Let me give you an example. We don't prosecute mass crimes. We don't prosecute a group of people for crimes, and we don't round up mass people and say, well, you're all part of this group and you're all guilty, and this is the punishment you're all getting. The same way we don't allow people to vote in mass. We don't say, well, you're all going to vote the same way. And so our system is really designed. The individual is the autonomous unit, and that individual's got to be held responsible for all their behavior. But that individual also has rights, and rights to push back against the government. And so my views on the Second Amendment and on gun control really correspond to my views on criminal justice. I fully believe in the rights of the individual. I'm a prosecutor, and I think that we absolutely have to have defense attorneys to protect the rights, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment rights. If one of my prosecutors is violating the rights of defendants, they don't work here anymore, because our system depends on respecting that individual who was created in God's image. Similarly, we all have the right to bear arms under our Constitution, and that's because we have a right to defend ourselves and not be dependent on the state for protecting our family. Look, I'm a gun owner, Bob. I've been a gun owner and someone who I grew up. My father was a police officer. As a child, we moved to Wyoming, and my dad hunted all our meat for many years. So I grew up in that culture, and so I'm very comfortable with guns, and I try to understand my friends, my neighbors, my colleagues who are not, and I not everybody has my perspective, so I do give people leeway, but at the end of the day, it's written in our Constitution that people have the right to keep and bear arms, and the Supreme Court has interpreted that as the individual right, and I think that's correct, because our whole other parts of government, other systems, focus on that individual right.
So the Second Amendment talks about a well-armed militia. And in that era, there are some theologians even who look at that provision and say, well, let's take that Second Amendment in context and say that really what that was the idea of allowing people to bear arms was to defend ourselves against foreign enemies. Not necessarily to defend ourselves in our own home. What do you think about that?
I studied history in college, and the reality is that the militias, the early militias that defended our nation during the Revolutionary War, that really fought the British and rebelled against the British. The reason why the Second Amendment is written like that is because everybody owned guns. We were a frontier nation, and so every individual, every household had a gun. And when they formed militias, the government or the Continental Congress didn't furnish them with guns. And so that's the reason for that phrasing. It says a well-regulated militia being da 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 da. It's because the individual had to have the right to be armed because they might have to participate in a militia. That's the thinking, the Second Amendment. However, so the real purpose was to defend not only against foreign invaders, but also potentially our own government if that same government became tyrannical. That was the thinking of our framers and our founders. I think that the right to defend your home was implicit. I think that it was so obvious that they didn't feel the need to put it in the Second Amendment, because everybody would have assumed, well, of course someone has a right to defend their home, and so no need to put it down there.
I'd like to speak to that in regard to Exodus 22. In Exodus 22, the Bible specifically talks about if a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him, but and it goes on. The idea that you can defend your home in Exodus itself, and then in Luke chapter 22 verses 36 through 37 says, "But now let one who has a money bag take it, and likewise a knapsack." And this is Jesus speaking to his disciples. And let the one who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one. Speaking of him sending the people out, sending his disciples out. And, back then they didn't have guns, but they had swords. That was their weapon. And to me, I look at that and I think that's good context for the fact that we have a right to self-defense, right?
We do. And those rights are enshrined in California law, right? People have a right to defend their lives. Now, under our law, you can't defend property with deadly force. So, right. For example, someone's stealing your car, you're watching them steal your car, you can't go shoot them. And that's, again, it goes back to the sanctity of human life and the value of human life. What our law basically says is a car can never match the value of a human life, even a human life who's committing a crime. So, I agree with that. So, but the law also says if you if you are being threatened, if your life is being threatened, if your family's life is being threatened, you have a right to use deadly force.
And that concept is actually implied in the following verses there in Exodus chapter 22, 2-3. It's interesting how our modern day law actually is consistent with what is said in Exodus.
Well, right. I mean, our laws were built, we were founded on Judeo-Christian principles. There's no question about that historically.
Hey, Mike, so to the present, what do you think if we went the way of Russia or China and we banned all weapons for the citizenry and these laws were passed, do you think that that's going to cause less violence, less gun violence, let's say, here in the United States?
No, not at all. People that say that are being dangerously naive. As I said, I've been a prosecutor for 25 years. I prosecuted many gang members. And part of the reason that I am still armed myself and I have a CCW as well is because I've put a lot of gang members, very violent people in prison. And the truth of the matter is that gangs are violent. They're bent on breaking the law, and they arm themselves. And almost never, Bob, do they arm themselves by going and legally purchasing a weapon. So there's a whole black market and underworld of a weapons trade that goes on. So it can be a very organized kind of gun running behavior, or it can be as simple as a gang that trades around a single gun when they're going to commit a crime, and that's also very common. But what you don't find is gang members saying, hey, I'm going to go down to the sporting goods shop and I'm going to buy a weapon. That's not how it works. So in other words, you could ban guns if you could. It's not constitutional, but if that changed, you ban weapons. First of all, that doesn't take away the impulse to commit crimes just because if weapons were unavailable. But even if we could somehow make weapons unavailable, there's millions upon millions of weapons in existence. And these guns wouldn't be turned in by gangs or criminals or cartels. That's not going to happen. That's delusional. And so they would be heavily armed, continue to be heavily armed. Right?
Are you aware, being that we're close to Mexico here in Riverside County, close to the border, and our border is so porous, are you aware, are there weapons that come through our southern borders up here illegally?
I assume there are. Mexico has a no gun policy. Think about that for a second. The country of Mexico allows no weapons, no individual ownership of weapons. And yet there's running gun battles on the streets of Mexico every night.
Right on our border.
Automatic weapons. So guns are coming across. What's really pouring across the border that's got me worrying me, keep me up at night, is the fentanyl that's pouring across the border. So it's the local gangs and the cartels and organized crime, it's proliferating and it's growing. The fentanyl trade is going to be a big problem in the coming years.
So what if the nation went the way of California and said, we want to ban assault rifles, or we're going to put these, I forget what that's called, but we're going to modify these rifles and they make it so that you can't, shoot, or you can't reload quickly. What do you think about efforts like that in terms of gun control?
I think in many ways that they're also misguided. These so-called assault rifles, a lot of them are no different than other weapons and rifles that are still readily available. Absolutely no different, other than the way they look on the exterior. And so, functionally, there's no difference. So you can go right now and buy the equivalent of an AR-15 in California. It just has a different outer shell, so it looks a little different, but functionally it's the same gun. So, I think that I would love our legislature to learn about guns, understand what guns are, understand the difference between fully automatic, semi-automatic, revolvers. I don't think there's a basic knowledge firearms. And I think that's important. I do think that firearms and the use and the ownership of firearms is a great responsibility, and that the individual, again, is responsible for becoming trained, learning how to safely use that firearm, making sure that that firearm doesn't get into the hands of children or criminals. And so again, it goes back to my original point. I think we've got to learn to trust the people. This is a nation that is supposed to be governed by the people. The people must be trusted. If they show that they can't be trusted, then there's the criminal law. But until they show that, the people rule here, and they've got to be trusted.
I'm going to ask you one last question, and,
Sure.
and it really is somewhat kind of the first question I'm going to ask again, but more directly on point. How does the Bible inform your position on gun control as your DA?
Well, the Bible, obviously, I don't enforce biblical law. I enforce the California law, and so I follow California law, no question about that. And I'm a Christian. I'm practicing Catholic, and so, my job is to enforce California law. Having said that, the way that I do my job is I respect the spirit of the Constitution, which is the individual, which comes from this idea that every single person is created in the image of God. The individual is primary. And so, we don't violate the individual's rights. We make sure that people get fair trials. We make sure that when something goes wrong in a trial, in a criminal trial, we fix it. It's the individual. Nobody should spend a day more in prison than they should. And nobody who's innocent should ever be wrongfully convicted. And it happens under our system. So that is how I look at doing my job. When it comes to the Second Amendment, I see it the same exact way. Individuals have a right to bear arms in this country. That's what our Constitution says. That's the way I'll enforce the law. They have a right to do so, and for good reason. And I support, I support. I guess I don't have a problem with efforts, registering guns and background checks. But I think we've got to be very careful when the government begins to talk about confiscations or buybacks. I think we're treading on very dangerous grounds, because the individuals in this country have a right to bear arms and defend themselves. And it is a right that I enjoy, and is a right that many citizens enjoy. And, I'll tell you, let's be really honest. When someone's in trouble, when there's a sound of breaking glass in the middle of the night, and in everybody's worst nightmare, you've got, your family, sound of breaking glass, or someone's trying to get into your home, of course, you're going to call 911. You're gonna hope that the police come, and they do, and they come. And the great thing about this country and our society is they come with no questions asked. They don't say, how rich are you? They don't say, did you donate to the local the mayor's race? They don't ask what your race is. They don't ask what your gender is. They come ready to help. But they can't stop everything, and they can't get there immediately. And so we have the right to defend ourselves and our lives and our loved ones. And that's a beautiful thing.
Well, I appreciate those great words. And I think one scripture verse comes to mind that I think you fulfill very well. And it says, what's the Lord require of you? In Micah 6:8, what does the Lord require of you? What's God require of you? But to love mercy, and to do justly, and to walk humbly with our God. And I appreciate you. I thank you for what you do. And thanks for taking the time to be with us and share your thoughts.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate being here with you.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you again sometime soon, I hope.
All right. Have a good day.
All right. God bless you. Thanks for everything.
God bless you. Bye-bye.